Grant Coleman signed his own employment paperwork under a name that wasn't his, in a break room he'd never once set foot in, despite having built the company that owned the entire building around it. He was 46, CEO of Coleman Bright Industries, a logistics conglomerate worth just under $3 billion. For the next 30 days, he was going to be Gary Holt, mailroom clerk, sorting envelopes for $14 an hour. If you love stories about people who take the harder road to find the truth, tap like, subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. 3 months earlier, an anonymous letter had arrived at Grant's home, not his office, his home, describing a culture problem dressed up as high performance, on the 4th floor. No names, no specifics he could act on. Just one line that stuck with him: you won't find it by asking. You'll find it by watching. Grant had built his company on a stated principle that how a company treated its lowest paid employees said more about its values than any mission statement in the lobby. He realized, rereading that letter, that he had no idea whether it was still true. He hadn't walked those floors in years. So he arranged it quietly, through one HR director he trusted completely, Priya Nair. New name. A background that would hold up. He grew out his beard, wore glasses he didn't need, and dressed like a man earning $14 an hour. His supervisor, Denise Okafor, trained him in 20 minutes and left him alone, which suited him fine. His job was simple: sort mail, deliver it by cart, log signatures. It put him in nearly every department in the building, moving through hallways as close to invisible as a grown man can be. The invisibility unsettled him first. He'd expected some people to be unkind and some pleasant. What he hadn't expected was how many simply didn't register him at all. Not rudely, just completely, the way you don't register a chair you're not planning to sit in. He delivered to the 4th floor, the one from the letter, dozens of times over 2 weeks, and could count on one hand who made eye contact. That floor housed the regional sales division, run by Preston Vance, a man in his late 30s with a reputation for hitting numbers Grant had personally praised on 2 shareholder calls. Grant watched him for 3 weeks before understanding what the letter had described. Preston wasn't cruel to Grant directly. Mail clerks didn't register as people worth the effort. What Grant witnessed instead was how Preston treated his own junior associates, particularly a young woman named Alicia Bryant, 11 months into her first job out of college. Preston corrected her in open meetings in a tone that had nothing to do with the correction and everything to do with the hierarchy. He took credit, casually and often, for numbers Grant could see from delivering internal reports twice a week had actually come from her accounts. He handed her the least desirable clients, then criticized her retention on those exact accounts in front of the team. Grant watched Preston tell Alicia, in front of 4 colleagues, that she should consider whether sales was really the right fit for her long term, delivered with a smile that made it worse. Alicia said nothing. She thanked him. That practiced, protective politeness sat wrong in Grant's chest the rest of the day. None of it showed up in the numbers Grant normally reviewed. Preston's division hit targets. His reviews glowed. Nobody above him had reason to look past results to method, and Grant realized, uncomfortably, that he was one of the people who'd never looked. What surprised him more than the cruelty was the kindness, in places he hadn't thought to look. Near the loading dock, Grant regularly crossed paths with a facilities worker named Ruth Alvarez, 61, 19 years at the company, who seemed to know everyone by name, not just executives, but temps, delivery drivers, the night cleaning crew most employees never saw. She remembered a security guard was studying for his GED and asked about it every week. She kept a drawer of granola bars for anyone who mentioned skipping lunch. She asked Grant real questions: whether he'd found an apartment, whether the commute was manageable, the kind that suggested she was actually listening. Grant learned, carefully, that Ruth had once quietly covered a temp worker's bus fare for 2 weeks out of her own pocket, telling no one, expecting nothing. She'd done things like this often enough over 19 years that other long-term employees knew, and nobody with actual power ever had. She'd never been Employee of the Month. She showed up every day and made the building slightly more humane, and almost nobody had noticed. By his 4th week, Grant had seen enough. He ended the experiment 2 days early and met with Priya, deliberately resisting the instinct to walk in and fire Preston on the spot. A single dramatic firing would fix nothing about a culture that had let this go unnoticed for years. Instead, he started something slower. A mandatory, anonymous 360-degree review process for every manager, weighted toward feedback from junior staff rather than the standard model that had let Preston's numbers speak louder than his behavior. When the results came back, Preston's scores from his own team told a story his quarterly numbers never had. He was placed on a formal management improvement plan with monitored benchmarks, not fired outright, because Grant believed real redemption deserved a chance first. But Grant made it unmistakably clear, in a private meeting Preston never connected to a male clerk named Gary, that results no longer mattered if the cost was the people delivering them for him. Alicia was quietly moved to a different team under a manager with strong reviews. Within 2 quarters, freed from a boss working against her, her numbers were better than Preston had ever claimed his own to be. Ruth received something Grant thought through carefully, not wanting it to feel like charity dressed up as recognition. He created a peer-nominated award for employees who lived out the company's stated values in ways that never showed up in performance metrics, nominated and voted on by staff at every level, not chosen by executives. Ruth won it the first year, nominated by 11 people across 4 departments who hadn't coordinated with each other. She cried at the small ceremony, genuinely startled. Anyone had been watching. Grant told almost no one about his 30 days as Gary Holt. He told Priya, obviously, and eventually, over lunch, he told Ruth quietly, one-on-one, because he owed her that honesty more than anyone else in the building. She laughed for a long moment, then said something he didn't expect. She'd wondered about the quiet new male clerk who never seemed comfortable in his own clothes, but it hadn't changed how she treated him. It never did, with anyone. That detail was the one Grant kept returning to. Ruth's kindness hadn't been calibrated to who might be worth it. It had simply been constant, offered without knowing whether anyone would ever notice, exactly why it had gone unrecognized for 19 years, and exactly why it mattered more than anything on Preston's quarterly report. Grant went back to being CEO the following Monday, back to the top floor, back to a building where everyone knew exactly who he was. But he kept the mailroom route mapped in his head for years afterward, and made a habit of actually looking at the people he passed instead of past them. He never ran another undercover month. He didn't need to. He'd learned that the truth about a company's culture never lived in the numbers reviewed at the top. It lived in how people treated each other when they were certain no one important was watching, and the only way to find it was to become, for a while, someone nobody thought was important at all. If this story reminded you that character shows up loudest in the moments nobody's grading, subscribe so more stories like this find you. Tell us in the comments, have you ever worked for someone who turned out to be completely different from what their title suggested? Take care of the people whose names you don't bother learning. We'll see you in the next one.